Now we went from someone we haven't covered to someone we covered once to someone, as we mentioned before, we covered many times. Our
Yeah.
friends from U2 joining us as one of the biggest bands in the world at this point in their career, Zooropa. Um, a very famous album for a lot of different
Yeah.
reasons, which we'll get into. But first, let's get into the numbers.
Yeah, Zooropa by U2 comes in at number 220 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 19 in 1993, number 1,167 of all time. It's U2's seventh highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1980's Boy, which we covered, 2000's All That You Can't Leave Behind, which
We did
maybe
not
we'll
cover.
cover.
We did not cover Boy, Matt. We covered
We didn't
War.
cover Boy. Oh, what did we cover? We covered
War.
War. I'm sorry. Oh, because it's got the kid on the front. It's the same kid on the front of both albums. I get confused sometimes. So you're right. My bad. We did not cover Boy. Unforgettable Fire was at 4 from 84. War from 1983 was ranked number 3 for them. Achtung Baby from 1991 was 2, and the Joshua Tree from 1987 is number 1. So thank you for that correction. Not making Rolling Stones list is Zooropa, but U2 is ranked number 23 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
You go ahead and take
So
the
you
first
want-
take.
I'll take the first takes. Yeah, so I can't say that I was terribly familiar with this record. I was familiar with certainly Numb and Lemon, the singles. Also somewhat familiar with Zooropa. So the three probably biggest songs I was familiar with. Actually, the last song too. I remember that The Wanderer, the Johnny Cat, where they had Johnny Cash come in. I did know that song. And my brother had this record, and so my recollection when this album came out, as personally as not a huge U2 fan. I do like U2, but I am certainly not in the category of many other people who would cite them as their favorite band, or just, being really well versed in their catalog and just loving everything that they've done. It's certainly not me on that, but I do very much like and respect U2. I remember when this album came out, and even years afterwards, probably even more so in a couple of years afterwards, how I remember hearing a lot of U2 fans being upset with this record, right? This is kind of, what are they doing? This is not, they kind of wanted another Joshua Tree or a Achtung Baby. Although I would say that you could see the breadcrumbs being laid from Achtung Baby to Zooropa. It was not like they did something that was totally different.
It was whole loaves of bread, Matt. Like, I figured this was like almost a sequel to it.
Yeah. They leaned more into that stuff, and certainly, and I'm not saying that this is as good as Achtung Baby, but I think that I understood why people were kind of starting, and certainly by the time they did Pop, right, that was kind of like the album that people were like, what is going on? I even had some friends back in the day say that they were mad at U2 for selling out, and I was like, what do you mean sell? U2 never sold out. Like, that
U2
implies
was
that they were
born as a sold out band. That's what their whole purpose was to be.
Yeah, I'm like,
as
how
big
could
as
you
humanly
sell
possible.
out? Yeah, how could you sell out when you're already massively popular and you just decide, you know what, I'm going to do something a little different and go in a different direction, and if it hits, great, and if not, like, it was definitely an argument we had many times, and I'm like, I don't think you understand or maybe your definition of selling out is different than mine, but I think you two just kind of wanted to do what they wanted to do, and I did a little bit of reading on this, because I think this album was done in the middle of their Zoo TV tour behind Achtung Baby, and it was originally supposed to be an EP, but then they just had a number of songs that they decided, let's just do an album. So, and I think that there was a little bit of Bono and the Edge thinking that this could be like their album, like their Sgt. Pepper, like that this is going to be the album that's really going to define them and stuff. So, and in later years they would go, yeah, it didn't really work out like that. And now I don't think that they play any of these songs live. It's
Feels
kind
more
of
like it was. They were trying to make it their like Gorillaz side project, and just kind of
but they were really trying to do. And I think they were trying to. I mean, this is definitely it's similar to Achtung Baby, but it's also different. I mean, freaking Lemon's like a modern disco song, So it's definitely got, and they've got Eno and Flood on here, helping with production and engineering and whatnot. So I was interested listening to this, going into this. I'm wondering how I would feel knowing that there were a number of U2 fans that didn't like it as much. And and I overall I liked it, especially the first half. I thought the first 5 songs were pretty strong. That's where all the singles are. Zooropa and Lemon I did know, but I forgot how well I knew them. As soon as they came on, I'm like, oh yeah, that part, right? Like that, the little little synth part that comes in at the beginning of Lemon. I was like, yep, I forgot about that, right? I don't know. I still think that the songs are here. I thought that Stay Far Away So Close, a song I wasn't really familiar with, I thought that was really good. They had a couple of good ballads like that one that probably stood out to me the most. The First Time was decent as well. They got some good bass lines on here for Clayton, and some grooves with Larry Mullen Jr. I think the second half is not as strong, but it's still enjoyable enough. Daddy's Gonna Pay for Your Crash Cars. That was a catchy song as well. Some days are better than others. Had a really good bass groove to it. I always liked The Wanderer. I thought that was kind of a cool use of Johnny Cash. It's a very synth, oriented song, which I don't know how many synth songs Johnny Cash sang on, but probably weren't too many. And that one was definitely one of them. And I thought it was kind of a cool way to round out the album. So I certainly wouldn't put it up. And I did listen to this a couple of times on YouTube when I was at work, and I saw some of it's again like the comments. There were a number of people saying this is the most underrated. Or either the most underrated or the best U2 album. And I was like, okay, slow your roll there. It's not the best U2 album. It's probably better than many people like that trash it. Say it is, and it's also not as good as the best U2 album either. So it's somewhere in the middle. It's probably properly placed here in best ever albums. But overall, I enjoyed it. I like the fact that U2 were going in a different direction. I don't know pop too well, and I don't know if we're ever going to cover that maybe in a bonus episode, but I always say I love it when artists, the established artists, they want to try something different. They go in a different direction. They alienate some of their fans doing so. And sometimes they fall on their face. Sometimes they create something that just really doesn't work, and it's panned, and it's rightfully so. But you know what? They didn't have to do that. They're trying to reach for something artistically, but sometimes when they hit, that's when you get like the Sgt. Peppers or the Kid A's or the the albums that really like, whoa, this is like this groundbreaking record that did all this stuff, and it was really great. This is not that, but it's really enjoyable. I liked it more than I thought that I would, so I'm thumbs up on it.
Yeah, this is a really strange album, Matt. It's like my take. This is like the U2 period where I don't have a firm handle on U2. Like they after Achtung Baby, they kind of exist a little bit, and then I am familiar with their early 2000 stuff, which I am not a big fan of. My dad was at the time, and I kind of always viewed that as, I would joke around with him and I go, this is where you lost your fastball, Dad, because you like this stuff. And and he would say, he was not a huge U2 fan until then. And then he went back and listened to stuff. He goes, I never really appreciated how good they were. And this stuff is there. I'm like, part of that is correct and part of that is incorrect. You know what I mean? It's kind of, But so this period just exists. Yeah, I know Numb because you just saw it on MTV. You're like, oh, this is This is an interesting U2 song. And then, you hear Lemon as well. And you're like, okay, U2's doing stuff. And then you would hear stories about the Zooropa tour and these screens and Zoo TV and all this stuff, and then pop, and it's kind of, there just started to become a lot of noise to U2. It was the first of many periods where U2 sort of just became like a caricature to me, I'd say, which carried on through the 2000s, and then putting my songs on your iPod, U2, and just there's all these different things that are there where I almost, like I said when we were covering them in the 80s, you almost forget that like U2 has a lot of songs. But the other problem with U2 is U2 also has a lot of really boring songs. And I agree with you, Matt. This is the tale of two albums. I was very interested in this album from songs 1 through 4. 5, 6 I liked but didn't love. I could have done without 7 or 8 at all. They just seemed like, when people knock U2 as the best-selling Christian rock band of all time, that's like the type of songs they're talking about. It's like I am now at the point where it's like I don't need to really read Bono's lyrics anymore, because it's either going to be about faith, his mother, or existential yearning and longing in the world, right? Like that's what he's gonna write about, and
Yeah.
even a song like Lemon, which is this like obviously Brian Eno disco-y song. It sounds like a type of, and I like that song, by the way.
Yeah.
It sounds like the type of song that like David Bowie was making in the late 70s, but U2 tried to do a David Bowie song, right? Like that's how I always describe that song to people. The Berlin trio, sound like sound and motion type David Bowie,
Yeah.
But I like that. But then you find out later it's about Bono's mother. I'm like, of course it is, even though it doesn't seem like it should be. Of course it's about his mother or faith, crisis of whatever in the world, existential. Dirty Day I liked, but largely for the bass line. The rest of it was fine. And then the less said about whatever that thing that they brought Johnny Cash in for at the end, the Wander, I thought that was horrendous. It's like I admire actually U2 for making such a unusual album, because it was a bold decision to release an album this bizarre, like with who U2 was at the time and what the expectations were. So I give them a lot of credit for that. And as I listened to this album, I didn't dislike it because I liked the fact that they were taking chances, and I thought some of them did hit, but it's not a consistent album. U2 had released all of these really, thematically coherent albums, and some I liked better than others, but they all sort of had the album. You listen to the songs and they sort of painted the same picture. This album, you're like, what even is this about? And it feels like a bunch of B-sides. And I think they recorded like a song I actually like better than almost every song on this album, called is it The Sweetest Thing? I think that was from these sessions. It got released later in the decade, and I actually very much like that song, and I feel like it would have fit really well on here, and I think it was recorded during this time. So there was a lot of stuff I liked, and good on U2 for taking chances. It's definitely a thumbs in the middle album for me, because they're much like this song. This album has a song called "Some Days Are Better Than Others." On this album, some songs are better than others for sure, and and so A for ambition, but maybe B- for results.
Yeah. No, it's fair.
The Johnny Cash thing is the most U2 thing ever. Like, you see, okay, who do we respect? We respect Johnny Cash, and like, what are we going to do? Well, we're doing this disco thing, Johnny, so we're going to bring you in, and we've discovered synths, and it's the Edge. Don't worry, the Edge will play a long, spacey guitar riff, and Johnny Cash is like, all right, this money,
I just love his voice,
prints.
man.
Yeah.
I love Johnny Cash's voice, and they made kind of like a Johnny Cash sounding song without using any of the like using totally different instruments, and so I get it. It's maybe it's gimmicky, but I don't know. I like Johnny Cash so much that like just throw his voice on there, and
maybe
it's not
gimmicky?
a groundbreaking. Yeah, it's. I'm okay with it though, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah, the first half is definitely stronger. I always liked Numb. I think that's just a cool song. The
That's
video
the
was definitely
too,
memorable.
Right?
It's the Edge. It's all in one note. It's just, I don't even think he's singing, right? Can you be singing if it's the same note throughout the entire song? It's probably closer to rapping than singing. But the video's all done in one take, and they're just messing with his face, but he just keeps looking straight ahead, singing the song, or whatever. But yeah, I think Lemon stood out a little bit to me. Like, I really liked the piano part in that. I thought that was just I liked that more than what I remembered. Same thing with Zooropa. And then I think the song I didn't know at all or didn't remember at all that I enjoyed was the Stay Far Away So Close. But yeah, the second half definitely tails off. I didn't dislike any song on here, but it definitely went from a stronger record to a more middle of the road record in the second half. I would agree with that.
Fair enough. I'm glad we covered it, because it did plug some holes of like, what was U2 doing in the 90s?
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't say essential, but worth a listen.
No, but it's a cool. I don't know. It's an interesting part of U2's career, and I think that, like I said, as if they were doing this in the middle of their tour, and they were finding some time to record. Yeah, it is pieced together. It's not really a coherent piece, but it's also that makes sense under the context in which it was created. So, but like I said, I don't know. I kind of rail a little bit against the people that like, the U2 fans are like, oh, it's a bunch, they got all mad about it, right? And I'm just like, let your band, let them do something different, and then they came back and they did albums that all that the fans all loved again, so they do come back, and even if they do stuff like this and never come back, they still have.
I call those albums All That I Can Leave Behind is what those albums were. Yeah.
I'm with your dad. I like the first one. They left me at Atomic Bomb. That's when I started to lose interest. But I think that there's a number of great songs on the All That You Can't Leave Behind.
Maybe there are.
I don't know.
Because there's other albums I've shat on and then later said, I've always thought I hated this and I found it was okay. So maybe.
Well, we should cover. I really do like that. I mean, that one was
that was well regarded.
Okay.
So
okay. Yeah. That one definitely that hit with me for sure. But I don't know. I think that when people really get mad at bands for changing, I'm like, you can always go back and do the old stuff. You can that's what's great about it, and let them do what they want to do. But I think that they needed to do this for whatever reason, even though they might look back on it and go, yeah, it's not exactly what we were trying to do. And that's okay.
Fair enough. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the episode, Matt.